We have all the council members on?
Yes,
Well, great. Okay,
I think, yeah.
perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Midcoast Community Council meeting for May 13th. I am going to be chairing the meeting tonight as the vice chair. I'm just doing a test run of the meeting. So I appreciate everyone's patience since this is the first time I'll be doing this. If at any time you notice any procedural issues, feel free to correct me. I think what we'll do is we'll start by by taking roll. Claire, would you go ahead and take roll?
Len Erickson,
Present.
Dan Haggerty. He was here a second ago.
He's there. He just has to go off mute.
Barbara Mathewson.
Here.
Dave Olson.
Here.
Michelle Weil.
Here.
Dan Haggerty.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, and I'm here, so that's all the members for him.
Great. Okay, Len is actually going to be moderating this meeting, and so he has a few comments that he wants to make just in terms of how to make sure that you're on mute and how to raise your hand when you would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Len.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, so this is our first meeting with Zoom. There are a couple of features to mention. One is when we want to hear from audience or public members, if they would like to participate, there's a raise a hand option that you can use. It's part of your participants list under more, and it will let you do a raise hand. So we'll use that when we want to see who wants to speak, etc. Most times in the meeting, we'll mute everyone. Council members can unmute, but request that other people remain muted unless they called on to talk. Other than that, I think we're ready to go, Claire. No, Michelle.
Okay, yep. So I'm just going to start this meeting by going through a quick overview because we have a number of agenda items tonight. And then we'll get into the meat of the meeting. But first we'll go through a Board of Supervisors report and any other government official reports. And so if there are any other government officials on who want to speak, I know we have the supervisor, we have Carrie speaking on behalf of the supervisor, but if there's anyone else, please go ahead and raise your hand. Then we'll do public comments on any items not on the agenda. We'll go through the consent agenda. And then the regular agenda has 4 items. And I wanted to talk about this because there's a couple that are somewhat similar. There's the first item is a mobility survey update. It's just an update on that survey that is currently in progress. The second is a letter that is requesting a moratorium on projects using county funds. And the third is another letter on Connect the Coast Side and Cypress Point and the process. So those two are somewhat related. I just want to make sure that everyone, before we start talking about item 4B, has read both letters. So please go ahead and, if you haven't yet, go through those letters. And then item 4D is where we're going to be talking about, also kind of related to Connect the Coast Side and the different virtual meetings that are happening, what we'll be doing with those in the May through July timeframe. And then lastly, we'll do council activity and future agendas. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the Board of Supervisors report. Carrie Dahlman, will you be giving that? Hi.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks so much. My name is Carrie Dahlman. I'm here on behalf of the Office of Supervisor Don Horsley. I'm here to just provide some updates from the county. On the topic of COVID-19 response, our health officer, Dr. Scott Morrow, will be releasing a statement this week with some new guidelines that will go into effect starting Monday, May 18. The health officer is planning to align San Mateo County with the state's early phase 2 of the what the state calls the resilience roadmap. And on that roadmap, there are 4 different stages The state is currently on stage 2, and that is regarding lower risk workplaces. So it will allow for curbside and delivery activities for retail, logistics, and manufacturing. Also, some other businesses can open with modifications, and Dr. Morrow expects to release the health order later this week. And I have a link to that press release that I can paste in the chat box. Next is an update about Census 2020. As of May 9, San Mateo County is at a response rate of 69.1%, which is pretty good. I do know that deployment of census outreach workers has been delayed, of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic that's going on. And also, each week, the Office of Community Affairs sends out a communication calendar that has ideas about for social media posts. And so we've included the Midcoast Council on these communications, and you're more than welcome to share any of that content on your social media platforms or your website as you would like. A next update is from the Planning and Building Department. They have some virtual meetings coming up on the Connect the Coast Side plan. Everyone is invited to join these virtual conversations. They'll be hosted by the County of San Mateo to learn about the Connect the Coast Side plan and share ideas to help shape the future of transportation on the Midcoast. So we're looking for recommendations about improving walking, biking, taking transit, and also driving on the Midcoast. And we'll also be having some small group discussions through the Zoom platform so people can share their experiences and ideas. The first meeting in that series is going to be on Saturday, May 30th, and that will be a Connect the Coast Side overview meeting. Saturday, May 30th, 10:30 a.m. And I will paste the information as well as the link for those meetings in the chat box because there's 3 separate meetings. One will be an overview, one will be focused on Montera and Moss Beach, and the third one will be focused on Princeton, El Granada, and Miramar. And of course, we also have a update to share about the mobility survey, which was co-hosted by the MCC and the county, which we'll share later on in the meeting. And that is all the updates I have. And I'll go ahead and paste the Connect the Coast Side meeting info in the chat box. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Do any of the members of the council have any questions? If so, go ahead and, looks like Claire's physically raising her hand. Claire, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I just wanted to add to your comments about the census. I think Dave has actually been posting this on social media as well, that the Midcoast is abysmal in the return rate. We've done very, very little compared to the rest of the county. And that's clearly because we have not gotten any forms because we don't have post office boxes. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows that you can go online and fill out the census, and we would appreciate it if you do, because it affects our funding for the future.
Yes, thanks, Claire. I've made a couple posts as well about that. It's really important that we get those numbers up. We're pretty much between the Moss Beach, Montera area, the El Granada and Miramar area, and then Pescadero are the 3 lowest areas of the whole county. So yes, anyone who hasn't done that yet, you don't actually need the form. You don't need to have received the form to go ahead and fill out the census. And we have the link to the website up on our website, and we can make sure that we put that in the chat as well.
I have a question for Carrie, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Carrie, in regards to the survey, I know we could talk about it more a little later, but I'm wondering, I have not seen any written like policy or any written plan on how to ensure maximum notice to the community.
Dan, do you want to save that for the survey topic since that is on the agenda?
Yeah, we could do that. I just mentioned it because Carrie brought it up on her report.
Okay, let's hold off on that question until then. Does anyone else have a question for Carrie? Okay, I'm not seeing any other raised hands, so let's go ahead and move on to Harvey Rarbach from Half Moon Bay.
Hello, I hope everyone is safe and doing well under the shelter in place. The city council at its last meeting passed an urgency ordinance, which is a temporary moratorium on commercial tenant evictions. It mirrors what the county is doing in the unincorporated areas. So we're concerned about our businesses, of course. The other main thing that the city council has been working on feverishly is trying to get our budget in balance. By state law, we have to. So this fiscal year, we're going to have a $2 million deficit, which we're going to cover by delaying some CIP projects and other operational savings. Next fiscal year, we're projected at this point to have a $3 million shortfall because of our PLP shortfall. We think we have a plan that will keep us with a balanced budget. It involves, among other things, unfortunately, some workforce reductions. We're laying off 5 people from the city. Those notices have gone out already. City staff is going to take a 10% furlough, and that includes our city manager, who's going to participate with the salary reduction also. We have at this point about $7 million in general fund reserves. The plan calls for using no more than 1 million of it up to June of 21. So financially, it looks like, although we're going to have to cut off, stop some services, we'll be able to get through this financial crisis. So it's a trying time for everybody. We're all in this together, and it is what it is. I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, let's first go to the council. Does anyone on the council have a question for Harvey? Nope. Okay. It looks like Greg Dieguez has a question. Greg, can you?
Yeah, Harvey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I appreciate you're going through some extremely difficult times there. Because Half Moon Bay is a key partner in the Sewer Authority Midcoast, as a resident of Montera, I'm concerned about the viability of SAM, given that Half Moon Bay is under stress. And I recall back in 2009 when maintenance, which was supposed to be done on the intertie pipeline, was deferred, which ended up resulting in the spill of 2017, the fines, the lawsuit, and all the rest of the stuff. So my question is there a public financial document that we residents up here can read that outlines in detail what you just said? Sounds like you've thought it through well, but I'd like to see it in writing.
You're talking about SAM?
No, I'm talking about the Half Moon Bay budget and plans to deal with the deficit. Because once I'm satisfied that you're handling the fiscal stress you're under, then I'll feel better about your ability to continue to fund SAM.
Okay. I think if you look at the staff report from the last city council meeting and the upcoming city council meeting on the 19th, it's pretty clearly laid out there on how we're going to tackle our financial issues.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, Harvey. I
You're
don't see
welcome.
any other, yeah, I don't see any other public officials who want to speak. So let's go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Before you do that,
Um,
Michelle,
oh,
I have
sorry.
one announcement.
Okay,
The San Mateo County Harbor District is having a public forum, virtual, of course, tomorrow night on their capital projects. And they have a survey that allows people to fill out the 5 of those projects that they think are most important to them. Whether you attend the meeting or not, I recommend that everybody fill out that survey. If you go to the Harbor District website, you'll find it.
okay, thank you, Dave. Do we have anyone? I know that we did receive one email from Greg, who's also on the line. Did we? But that's regarding an agenda item. Do we have any members of the public who want to make a comment about something not on the agenda? If so, please go ahead and raise your hand.
We do have one email that I'll read at the end.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Why don't you go ahead and read that email, Dave?
Okay, Tracy Workus sent mail to us on capital improvement projects. And she said public comment, even though it's on our agenda. Also CC'd Mayor Eisen and Half Moon Bay. Many capital improvement projects have not been taking place in our community. Basic upkeep is also not being performed. This includes trash removal at the jetty and at Poplar Beach, among other places. None of this is okay. I've heard that many city employees that work at City Hall are being fully paid, yet are not working from home, while maintenance workers are being laid off. How can you lay off the people that do the real work to keep our community beautiful? Pay them to do their job, lay off the people that can't work. Please get your priorities in order. Thank you.
Okay, Claire?
I have
So
the
you
fun
have
button quicker. I just want if Dave, would you mind spelling that person's last name?
Yes, it's WIRKUS.
Thank you for the minutes.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then to the consent agenda. The only item on the consent agenda tonight is the minutes from April 22nd. Do I have a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Thanks,
Second.
Lynn. Do I have a second? Yes,
Second.
Claire, second. Okay, and let's go ahead and take the roll call vote. Claire, can you go ahead and do that?
Lynn,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Mhm.
Okay, time to move on to the regular agenda. The first item is the update on the mobility survey. So I will actually be presenting that, and we have Ellie Dahlman here on the line to answer any questions. So let's see. I think Len, you're going to present the slides, and I'll walk through them. Can you go ahead and pull that up? Perfect. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So first, just a little bit of background on the survey. Can you go on the slide 2, Lynn? So this is a survey that we initiated earlier on in the year as part of a project. As you guys can remember, early on January 9th and February 19th, we had some presentations from the group Common Knowledge to the MCC. And the purpose of that project was to identify community information needs and community engagement opportunities. We formed a subcommittee that was me, Dan, and Barbara. And on January 22nd, we met and identified 2 main goals. One was to develop a better understanding of how the community feels about high priority issues. We had a desire to do that through some quantitative and qualitative research because of some of the COVID, the issues because of COVID. We've pretty much focused on more of the quantitative research in terms of doing a survey. However, we do have some qualitative questions in that survey. And, that's just the first step. We also want to be able to provide the community with more timely information about topical issues, things like safety, evacuation, recreation, and the official planning processes. Next slide. So we launched a survey in April, and the purpose of the survey is to reach, broad cross-section, ideally a representative sample of people on the Midcoast. We have over 13,000 people here, and we want to get enough people to respond to the survey to be able to make infer learnings about what's important to people. We decided to focus on the topic of mobility because in some of these we did have some early interviews that the group Common Knowledge did with different people on the Midcoast, and that came out as one of the most important topics. But we also, are interested in other topics as well, and hopefully this will just be the first of many surveys that we do. We also wanted to gauge interest in a Midcoast newsletter and the types of topics that people would be interested in seeing in that newsletter. Next slide. So the good news is that we've had over 500 responses submitted so far. We've had a lot of help spreading the word and trying to get people to take the survey. So we had help from Coastside Buzz, from the Half Moon Bay Review. We also had help from the school district, Cabrillo Unified School District, to get that out to people there. And so, we do have 500 is a pretty good number, especially when our overall population is about 13,000. But we do want to keep going for a little bit longer and see if we can get some additional responses from some of the communities that are underrepresented. And so the highlight tonight is really going to be on very, very high level, like who has taken the survey so far and what they have identified as topics that are important to them. And then we will be announcing a closure date for the survey. And at the next meeting on the 27th, we'll be going through the full results.
So Michelle, may also be worth answering Dan's question. The county promoted this on Nextdoor and on the county Facebook pages. And the MCC did the same thing. We promoted it on Nextdoor and on the MCC website and the MCC Facebook page. So pretty much every possible mechanism of communicating to the public was used on this.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely not true in my opinion.
Well, it did take place. Why don't we save that discussion for the end? But
yeah, we keep pushing it back.
Well, yeah, I mean if the outcome of this is going to be we can have a discussion of how to continue to get more responses before we close the survey of those underrepresented groups. So let's go through who those groups are, and then we can talk about how we can reach them. Next slide. So what have we heard so far, and who has taken the survey? So this is a breakdown of the population of people who have taken the survey. And of course, anyone under 18 is not, we don't usually collect data and surveys from people under 18. Usually it's only adults that take surveys. So it's definitely normal not to get anyone from that. We have a couple of people who are under 18 who did take the survey. But the things that I'm really noticing here when I compare this to the population is that people in the 18 to 24 and then the 25 to 34 brackets are pretty underrepresented. Just in terms of the 2010 census, we had about 3% of people in that 18 to 24 age bracket, and then another like 7% in 25 to 34. And you can see that we have 0% and 4% here. And that's before excluding the under 18. So it's actually a little bit, even if we're just looking at people over 18, it would be even higher than that we would expect. And then the rest of the ages are pretty represented, pretty well represented. We have, obviously if we have fewer people in the younger age brackets that have taken the survey, we have more people than the population in the older age brackets, but that didn't stand out in any of the specific age brackets. It's really just that lower end where we've had trouble reaching those people. So just keep in the back of your minds how we could potentially reach people, who may be not subscribing to the newspaper, not potentially not on Nextdoor, people who are maybe don't have kids, so didn't see the message that went out through the school district. So what are some ways that we can reach them? And then next slide. So the other thing that we did is that the survey was made available in both English and Spanish. However, only 3% of people who responded took the Spanish version of the survey. And while we don't have exact data on how many of our constituents are Spanish speakers, we know it's higher than this. And so we've tried to do a couple pushes. We did have a post that went out in both English and Spanish. But bottom line is we're definitely short on responses from Spanish speakers, and so I'd like to see how we can potentially increase that. Next slide. So in terms of the geographic breakdown, we asked the question just to make sure that people who are taking the survey do live on the Midcoast. And 61% of people said they live on the Midcoast, and another 23% said they both live and work. So about 84% of people who have taken the survey do live and work, do live on the Midcoast, and an additional 6% work on the Midcoast. We do have some visitors and some other, which were like Pacifica or Half Moon Bay residents. But mostly we were successful in reaching the right people in terms of geographic distribution. The next slide has we asked the question of, do you rent or own? And it was 20% rent, 78% own their homes here. And that is pretty similar to what the overall population, we know that between 80 and 85% of the coast are homeowners. So really close there. And then looking at the next slide of where on the Midcoast people live, of the people who stated that they do live on the Midcoast, we have 40% in El Granada, 26% in Moss Beach, and 24% in Montera, with a 9% in Miramar and 2% in Princeton. And when I compared this to the census data, it was also very close. Census data doesn't actually break out Miramar and Princeton, but El Granada is the largest community, followed by Moss Beach, followed by Montera. So it's pretty evenly distributed. And then next slide. Then another question that we asked was, are you a parent or a caretaker of children? And I think it was a little ambiguous the way that this question was written, because it doesn't necessarily mean you have a child under 18, which we probably should have asked that way, to really understand like how many people have children who are living at home with them. But 2/3 of people said that they are a parent or a caretaker of children. And then next slide. So we had a couple open-ended questions in the survey that really give us a lot of context of what are people feeling. You can see the question at the bottom. It was, when it comes to getting around on the coast side, what's working well for you? What's your biggest challenge? And over 400 people responded to at least one of our open-ended questions out of the 500 plus that took the survey. But that's a really good response rate, considering that people have to take time to type in an answer, not just click a button. And so this is a word cloud that just looks at what words came up the most, and then we'll get into more details later, and then even more details at the next meeting. But you can see that some of the biggest words that stand out here are traffic and weekends. Definitely, I think something that is pretty well known around here that it's very hard to get around on weekends because there's a lot of traffic. People talked about school, getting to and from school, biking and driving, the Highway 1, traffic lights, the challenges and difficulties just in general about getting around here. And then if you go to the next slide, we have a few quotes that we pulled out. And we'll make all of this available once the survey is closed. But so as you saw, this question was asked in two parts: what's working well for you, and then what's the biggest challenge? So you can see what's working well for people. Someone said speed bumps on high traffic neighborhood streets work well for me to remind myself to drive slow and mindfully and to feel safe when walking or riding a bike. Speed bumps are definitely not prevalent in a lot of places throughout the Midcoast, so I'm not exactly sure what they were talking about there, but something someone said. People commented on their bike paths, the wonderful recreational opportunities that we have here, the fact that walkability is improving, and it's a good way to get around on weekends. Some people did compliment the Sam Trans bus service and say that it's on time. And then people did like to talk a lot about the hikes and the recreation that they did. So talking about the Moss Beach Bluffs, the Coastal Trail, and the Montera Mountain hikes that they do. And then next slide. So what's your biggest challenge? And we saw a lot of answers, and this is just a sampling. We'll definitely go into more detail later, but biggest challenge is crossing Highway 1 on foot. As we all know, that's pretty difficult. Traffic during peak hours and weekends on 92 and Highway 1, taking the bus. Seniors are unable to get to the bus stops. I think that's supposed to be stops now existing. The biggest challenge most of the time is pulling out onto the highway and beginning to drive on Highway 1, turning left onto Highway 1. Safety, the fact that there are no crosswalks with lights on Highway 1. I think that's specific to Montera and Moss Beach. Sidewalks and unsafe street crossings are very difficult. I have 2 young children, and the lack of sidewalks in El Granada makes walking around our neighborhood very difficult. And then school, I take my daughter to school by bike twice a week, and we always have to be vigilant as there are very few bike lanes or shoulders to ride on aside from the coastal trail. And we can go on to the next slide. So this was the last question on communication needs. So we asked people, how do they want to hear about issues that on the Midcoast? And that you can see the word cloud. There's a lot of commentary about MCC, community meetings, thoughts on how we could have better communication from the county and City of Half Moon Bay. So one of the respondents said, we'll start with more of these surveys, which is good because that's something we're planning on doing. Zoom meetings, regular public forums, guided feedback, new informative content for the MCC website on a regular basis, holding more county level meetings that deal with coastside issues, but here on the coast side. So I did read some complaints about how some county level meetings are held over the hill. And so people are wanting to see more of that here. Publicity and advertising are important, so we know when and where meetings will happen, and then more outreach to the Spanish speaking community. Okay, and next slide. So what we're proposing, and we can definitely discuss this, but is to have a final push to gather responses over the next week. So between now and May 19th, try to reach out to the people that were getting, the Spanish speakers, the younger constituents that were not getting as many responses from, to get survey responses from them before we close the survey. At some point we did keep this open longer than anticipated because of COVID-19 and just, knowing that it may be harder for people to take a survey right now. They may be busy, but on the other hand, people might have more time because they're sheltering in place. And so at some point we just need to close this and do the final analysis of the survey. So the plan is to close that on May 19th, which is next Tuesday. And that will give us time to prepare and present the full survey results, including all the details. And we'll make, like I said, make available all the open-ended responses with no names associated with them at the prior to that meeting, and then have the full results presented on May 27th. So that's the last slide. I know, Dan, you have concerns about us not making, not collecting information from everyone that we could. I mean, we're certainly not trying to exclude anyone. I think it's pretty normal that older people are more willing to take surveys and generally have more time. I worked in market research for a long time, and that's pretty standard. As we know, it's also harder to reach our Spanish-speaking constituents, although we'd really like to. I'm just wondering if Dan or anyone on the council, if you have any ideas for how we can do a better job of reaching more people.
Yeah, I have some ideas.
Great, why don't you go ahead?
So there should be some notification signs along the Highway 1. There should be a mailer out to reach all the community members. There should be signs posted near the post offices. And that's just a start. I'm sure there are other ideas that could ensure a decent participation from the community. And what we have now, I don't believe is acceptable. And I am absolutely against the closure of the survey. I'm finding all kinds of community members that have never heard of it, and they just don't understand it. They don't understand the importance. Connect the coast side, or some are kind of, oh yeah, we heard about that before, and I don't know what's going on now. So I think the community is essentially, generally, just not aware of what's going on, and I think we should change that.
Yeah, and I think the goal of the survey is to start to change that. I mean, overall, we have.
Yeah, but by closing it does not achieve that goal.
Well, the survey is just meant to be this survey is meant to be the first step in collecting feedback from the community with the specific focus on mobility. I hope that this is the beginning of a long list of surveys that we can do on various topics. And then part of it too is just that we want to be able to close it before the meetings take place. We want to be able to look at all the data from the survey prior to the first Connect the Coast Side meeting, which is going to be at the end of May, on May 30th. And then I don't know, I mean, maybe Ellie could speak to the feasibility. I think I like the idea of trying to put things up at the post office, and I think that's something that we could do pretty easily in the next couple of days at each of the post offices. I think a mailer is going to be pretty expensive. I don't really personally, especially if we're trying to reach younger population and Spanish speakers, I don't know that a mailer is going to achieve that, and I don't know that that's, it costs a lot of money to mail to 13,000 people. So I don't
Post
know
office
if we have the
could use
budget
the
for
work.
that. Huh?
Post office
Yeah,
could use the work.
that's true.
Excuse, I have a question. I have a question. I was under the impression when Dawn and Common Knowledge came to the meeting that we were able to use staff, county staff, and funds from there to pay for things like a survey. It's my question.
Yeah, Ellie, do you want to go ahead and speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to put together a flyer that I could share with you all to post throughout the community, including at the post office. When we were kind of coming up with the outreach plan, one of the things that we did talk about and consider doing was a mailer. However, I think it was through the interviews we heard from some folks that when a previous, I don't know if it was a survey or an event, they did a mailer, and a lot of the mailers ended up going into the garbage, and the people that we spoke to felt that it really wasn't an effective way to reach people. So
Yeah,
we did
that
not
was this.
move forward with the mailer.
That was the survey that the El Granada Community Services District did, and that they did say that the mailer was not very effective in getting responses.
Yeah, quite a few of them were obviously straight to the recycling barrel, at least in El Granada.
Yeah, but we can also say that everything that has been done so far has not been effective.
I disagree. I mean, almost a 4% response rate for a survey is pretty good. Like I mean, you can compare to. I've done market research for a long time. It's statistically significant. It can get you the data on exactly how statistically significant it is, but it generally allows us to determine the margin of error. I was just going to actually pull the numbers. Last time I pulled it was less than 5% on each individual question based on the responses that we already have so far. And if we're able to push it up, we have a little bit over 500 right now. If we're able to get another couple hundred, let's say, over the next week, that just pushes the margin of error down even further.
Yeah, so let's not close it. Let's not even talk about closing it right now, please.
Oh, do you want to go through the other council members?
Yeah, let's go through and have everyone. This is not an item that we're voting on. It's more of an informational presentation. So let's go ahead and have everyone speak and let weigh in on this on the council. Len, let's start with you.
I mean, I felt from other surveys I've seen done locally, which there haven't been too many, it's been a good response to date. And so I've been pleased. I think it's important to have a final endpoint for it. So I'm also supporting, coming to a conclusion relatively soon there.
Thanks, Len. Claire?
We'll go back to what the purpose of this survey is, and if it's important to have it before they start doing the community meetings about Connect the Coastside, then it has to be wound up. I would like it if somebody could put together, maybe Ellie, some flyers for the post office and get them out to the post office maybe tomorrow. I think that would be reasonable, but other than that, I think we've done.
Thanks, Claire. Dave?
Yeah, I think we've got a really good response. Yes, it'd be nice if we'd reach more of the Spanish-speaking community, but I think we're in pretty good shape, and I'm happy to go post them at all the post offices if LA will get the flyer to me.
Yeah, and I would just say we should make it in English and Spanish, Ellie, if possible.
Definitely, we can do that.
Okay, Barbara?
I agree. I think it's time to close it, and I like the idea of something at the post office because that's where most of us get our information from. So I'm happy with closing it.
Okay. Yeah, I just did that calculation. So given our current sample size of 520, a little over 500, about 520, and a population of 13,000, that gives us like a 4.2% margin of error for any given question at a 95% confidence level. So it can be 95% confident that the answers are within 4.2% either way of the percentage of the population who answers one way or the other. Dan, do you have any last comments? It's just going around.
So I'm getting the feeling that it's non-negotiable and that the date is already set for closure of the survey. Is that correct?
Well, it seems that 5 of the 6 members of the council agree that we should close it on that date. And although it's not really up for,
well, no,
like this was not presented as a vote. I mean, I think you're the only one that feels that we shouldn't close it.
Am I the only one that feels that we should have a good cross section of the community? Am I the only one that feels that we should have a transparent process of this whole survey and future surveys? Am I? Am I truly?
I'll answer that. I think that we do have a transparent process and that we do have a good
where is it written down?
representation.
Where is it written down? I have not seen a written report of how it will be transparent.
So Dan, you keep bringing up transparency on this and asking for something written. It would be really good if you could say something about what you think would provide that transparency, because I think we're all, or certainly I am confused by what you mean about that, given how widely we publicized this and had it in the newspaper and everything else.
Well, I disagree. I would not say it's widely publicized. So to answer your question, Dave, I would say that number one, a written document on how it is publicized, okay, so that we know, everybody, the community members can see that. I'd like to see it expanded. I've heard tonight and other meetings, some of the ideas. They're not sufficient for me. I don't, again, people, every community member that I spoke to had no idea. So it's not working.
Well, and I guess I'll add one other thing, is that as members of the MCC, you are all very well connected in your community. And so we are really also looking to you, in addition to Nextdoor and in addition to, any other ways that we're getting the word out. We're really looking to you to help us. If you come across somebody that hasn't heard about it, send the survey link to them in an email, or at the survey flyer that that we'll put together, that's something that I'll make sure to send to all of you. That way, that's something that you can share with other people. If you run into them on a walk or something in your neighborhood, you could share that with them as well.
Well,
Thanks,
I would like to politely request some more time to do that.
I don't know if that's possible right now. Dan, we want to close the survey and analyze the results prior to the next meeting and prior to Connect the Coast Side meeting starting. Why don't we make a good push for this? I think Ellie can go ahead and make those flyers. We'll make sure that those get posted. I'll do another posting on Facebook and Nextdoor. And yeah, like Ellie said, I think we should encourage all of us to send it out to our personal networks, and try to get as many people as possible. I see we do have a comment from the audience. Greg, looks like you have your hand raised. Do you want to go ahead and speak?
I just wanted to ask if what Dan said was true. It wasn't posted at the post office. Was anything posted, for instance, at Pillar Point, where they have a lot of Spanish speaking? And then the question is, I understand you have a deadline, Michelle, and you're going to have to do your analysis by when you have to do it. But what does it hurt to leave it open and follow up? Because, geez, it's going to be 2 days before you get this stuff out there, and then they're only going to have 3 days to comment. I don't see that this last minute push is going to accomplish much unless it can linger for maybe even another week. Not that you shouldn't wrap up your first analysis, but we could, do a second analysis. So I'm just curious how much on the ground stuff was actually done. Dan was citing a bunch of ideas. I don't know if those were tried.
Yeah, it's been mostly digital because it is an online survey. So I think I agree. Ellie, when do you think we can feasibly get a flyer that can go up at the post office? Today's Wednesday. Can we get that by tomorrow or Friday?
Tomorrow, yeah. Definitely. we'll make that a top priority. I think, I think what the date that you had on the slide there was 1 day short of a week from today. I mean, I guess one option is to push the close date one more day to the 20th. So it's a week from today. I don't know how much difference that might make, but I forgot.
Yeah, I think that would make a difference. Why don't we go ahead and push the end date to the 20th? That should still give us time to analyze the results prior to the meeting. I mean, I think typically you just want to close a survey at some point. Having it open, if we're not going to include the additional responses in the analysis, is not really useful. So I would say let's go ahead and get those flyers up. If you could get those to us tomorrow, it sounds like Dave can go ahead and post those at the post offices. I'll make sure that I make posts on Facebook and Nextdoor. Please, everyone, do go ahead and send this out to your networks. Let's leave it open till the 20th, and then we can, and still have time to analyze prior to the 27th meeting.
Can we get a written report on the outreach that has been taken to date?
It's in our minutes, Dan.
Yeah, we've talked about this at like 4 different meetings.
Summary, just one sheet summary from the county. I guess they're taking the lead.
Are you asking for the actual responses or just for the process?
A written report of how the survey was outreached to the community.
Why don't we do this? I know that the county did reach out to several different groups. I know some of those groups, like I mentioned earlier on, Cabrillo Unified School District, Connect the COSI, the COSI Buzz, and the Half Moon Bay Review. I personally reached out to them, and it was included in one of their email newsletters. If the county could include a full list of everyone that was reached out to in the presentation for the 27th, I think that could, hopefully that would be satisfactory to you, Dan. Looks like Len has a comment. Len, can you? Len?
I think following up on what Ellie said, that if each council member would just go home tonight or tomorrow and send out their personal blast to 20 people and push it from there, that's a good way to do it. How many emails have you sent out, Dan?
Len, I'm looking at a broad, I have a certain circle, but I'm talking about a broad outreach. Okay.
That's what we're talking about here, Dan.
And I do not accept that, 20 emails here, 20 emails there will reach everybody.
We're not going to reach everybody. We're not, and it's not reasonable to expect that.
I don't expect every person in the community to respond, but we should attempt to get the message out in an acceptable manner. There's a point of disagreement, I understand, but I just do not believe. Again, I'm going to say it again. Every single person I talked to in the community had no idea. Okay, so I'm using that as a metric, but it's not working. We need to expand the outreach. We need to extend the deadline.
Dan, that's one of the attempts of this whole process, is to figure how we reach the people that aren't being reached. So for every one of those people you've talked.
Oh, Dave, you want to mute?
Sorry.
You said for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave, did you want to say anything else?
Somebody unmuted my other secondary. That's where the feedback came from.
Got it.
No, I was just saying, if Dan can ask everybody who didn't know anything about it, what mechanism would have reached them, that would be very helpful. That's one of the things this whole survey mechanism outreach is about.
Okay. A couple other people have their hand raised now. Dolores Silva.
Having it, that's part of being one of those people.
Someone speaking in the background. Everyone else besides Dolores, please go on mute. Thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that I agree with you on a lot of these points about maybe this is a representative or a good sample result. However, you pointed out a very key thing was that you're not reaching the Spanish-speaking community. And maybe the MCC could target that in I recently bumped into Joaquin Jimenez at the grocery store. He was gathering food to distribute to Montero residents. I mean, a lot of these people are focused on some very critical issues, and maybe they don't have internet. So this is probably you're not gonna draw in these people who are always missing from all these outreaches because they've got other issues going on or limitations, and not just them, but there's a lot of people who are focused on other things. I mean, for me, I've been focused more on connect the coast side and the mid-pen proposal and all this stuff, and I really find it difficult to believe that we're being driven by connect the coast side, which makes no sense at this point given the pandemic and that everything can change and that there's really no money for these proposed highway ideas. So it's kind of a little convoluted. But anyway, I think if you wanted to bring those people in, it's going to have to be a special effort that's not at the post office. I mean, in addition to the post office. That's it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Do you have any specific ideas on how, I mean, potentially maybe Joaquin could help us reach people? Maybe you could put me in touch with him.
Well, I'm not, I'm not connected into the Half Moon Bay kind of situation, and maybe that is Half Moon Bay, but he probably would know, and I have his email address. I recently met him and have talked to him now and then, but I can give you his email address.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, we definitely would like to make that effort. I did reach out to Lisa Ketchum specifically and ask her to post on the Pillar Ridge, or send out something to the Pillar Ridge community. And we went from 2 to 10 responses after she did that outreach. Agreed that those constituents aren't necessarily on the same, next door and the social channels and the the areas that we've been reaching out through. So, and any ideas, I really appreciate that. We can see how we can get more responses from our Spanish speaking community.
And another thing I noticed recently on Nextdoor, I mean, I don't take the bus, so I wasn't really aware, but people talking about now that we are in this pandemic, that some of those buses don't come anymore because they don't have enough drivers, or that they're full by the time they get, say, to New Leaf because they're social distancing. So the issues are changing quite dramatically as we are going through this
Definitely.
time.
Agreed. Thanks, Dolores. Claire, you also had your hand raised.
I was just reiterating that the list of all the agencies and groups that have been reached out to for this survey is in the minutes from the last meeting and probably from the meeting before that as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we have to move on. We're already late on our second agenda item, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. We will make an effort to reach out. We will extend the closing date to May 20th, and we will plan on presenting the additional results at the next meeting. Okay, item 4B is a moratorium on projects using county funds. This is a letter that Claire, Barbara, and I worked on. We're going to have Claire go ahead and present the background on the letter. And the letter is available on our website and in the agenda. It was an attachment to the original agenda that was sent out I think Len, Claire, did you want Len to go to pull up the slide?
We'll need the slide after the letter's read.
Okay. Do you want to give why don't you go ahead and give the overview that you wanted to start with, and then we'll have Barbara read the letter, and then we'll go back to you for the slide.
Okay. Over the last few months, we've noticed that a number of projects that the county's been working on for a long time are finally coming to a head where detailed public input is being asked for and where the county will actually make decisions about what to implement regarding these proposals. At the same time, everything has changed in the last couple of months. For example, we're meeting here online, and two or 3 months ago, we had a meeting in our meeting area with 250 people, and that's not going to happen anytime soon again. So one thing that's changed is we don't have in-person public meetings anymore, and we're having to find new ways to get community input as seen with that survey. The other thing that's changed with this virus is that the financial status of the county is diminished and unknown. We don't know how bad things are going to be. We don't know how what's going to happen with individual people's finances. We don't know what's going to happen with companies, with nonprofits, with government at any level. So the assumptions that the county could afford to put money into some of these projects that they've long been planning on have kind of fallen apart. We don't really know whether they can afford it or not. In addition, the needs of the community may change over the next few months. For example, the traffic needs might be completely different because people's lifestyles will be changing. So because so much is now uncertain, we think that it would not be prudent for the county to commit itself to projects that may not be suitable or affordable in the near future. We think that a pause should be made in any decisions that would involve commitment of county funds that aren't emergent until the county and other people have a chance to evaluate what the situation is actually going to be, both in terms of gathering public input and in financing any non-urgent capital improvements. So with that, I'll ask Barbara to go ahead and read the actual letter. You do have it in the agenda, but I would like for you to be able to hear what the letter actually says. So Barbara?
Could we just put it up on the screen instead of reading it? It's really awkward to read letters.
I would really like to read the letter. You can put it up on the screen too, if you'd like.
Let's have Len go ahead and show it, and then Barbara, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. This is addressed to Joe LeClaire, Supervisor Don Horsley, Steve Monowitz, and Katie Faulkner. The current pandemic crisis is affecting all aspects of our local and national life, and the full impact of this will not be known for some time. Because of this, the Midcoast Community Council is asking for a pause to allow the county to invest its money in the community in a predictable and prudent way. There are planning and development proposals currently under study, which will involve significant public expenditure. These proposals deserve robust review and buy-in by the community. And since they will involve long-term changes, they deserve to have the security of a predictable source of funding. We see two major areas in which the current uncertainty caused by COVID-19 negatively impacts any attempt to finalize plans that involve capital expenditure. First, the current situation does not allow for the usual avenues of informing the community about issues, and it does not allow for the usual ways that community members share and express their concerns and questions. Virtual meetings may be the only way to hold meetings at this time, but they are not enough because they rely on the ability of community members to comfortably access the meetings and to interact with each other and with county staff. The community survey currently being circulated does not address the specifics of CTC proposals or other possible changes. Major changes that will profoundly affect the life of all coastside residents should not be improved until full community involvement is possible. Secondly, the county's financial situation is presently unknown, but is expected to be considerably less robust than it has been. Likewise, the finances of individuals, businesses, and nonprofits may be seriously impaired. The county will have to cope with maintaining essential functions and an increased burden of providing a safety net to allow recovery for individuals and businesses. Tax revenues and revenues from state and federal sources are unknown, but likely will be diminished. It is unclear at this point how much will be available for purposes such as public works and other improvements. The county should not make commitments to significant investments until it has a clearer picture of its resources. The Midcoast Community Council supports a moratorium on any final decisions regarding non-urgent county funds until January 2021. At that point, the community will hopefully have been able to participate in a robust review of proposals. The county will have a fuller sense of its resources, and larger governmental and social issues will be clear. This pause would affect planning for all non-urgent projects that will call for county capital expenditure. Final approval of Connect the Coast Side would be delayed until the situation is clear. Approval and implementation of development projects, whether public or private, would be delayed if they require the county to make improvements to facilitate them. Any development projects already fully approved by the county and any development that is completely privately funded would not be affected, nor would any emergency improvements. We strongly believe that major changes to the coast side, even if they are positive, should not be approved without full community acceptance and without knowing the financial position we will be in as this health crisis resolves.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. I wanted that to be read because I wasn't sure how much access people had who are actually online would have had to the agenda. But I'll wrap this up fairly quickly. As you can see on the slide here, our points are that there's uncertainty, which is from the COVID-19 affecting projects that are considered for the coast. We are concerned about the adequacy of meetings. We don't know for sure if they're going to be adequate or not, but there's a very strong possibility that they may not be. We're even more concerned about the financial situation that the county will find itself in, and that we're mostly concerned that nobody knows the answers to those two questions. And so we are recommending that until those answers are clearer, no decision-making on non-urgent projects using county funds should be made until January. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll go through the council for any just clarifying questions. Then we will go to the community for any questions or comments, and then we'll go back to the council for discussion. So starting, I'll just call the members of the council and see if they have any clarifying questions, starting with Len.
So the question I have is, you've referred to Connect the Coast Side in particular. Is it's already a funded project as a high-level planning project? And so with particular reference to the virtual meetings proposed in June, is this saying you would like those stopped, or that they can go ahead as a stop? You just don't want to have a final decision made?
No, I think that the virtual meetings are all that's able to happen right now, and it's a good thing they're happening. I'm fine with that. I just don't know if it's going to be adequate, because I don't, like right now, there have been 19 people approximately on this call. 13 or so of them have been public officials. I don't know if that's going to be the case when we have those meetings or not. We just don't know yet. So I don't know if they'll be adequate, but I'm not sure what else you asked. Connect the Coast site isn't totally funded, I don't think. Joe has been talking about finding funding sources for various parts of what they want to do with Highway 1, so it can't be totally funded.
That's not Connect the Coast side. Those are potential future projects.
Okay. Well, okay, when the potential future projects we're saying should not be approved at this time.
Let's continue to go around if that answers your question, Len. Okay, great. Dan, do you have any clarifying questions?
No, I approve the letter.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I am aware of no plans of the county to spend anything on capital projects on the Midcoast anytime between now and 2021. The paving is done for the year. Connect the Coast side is purely a planning process. Any projects coming out of it are years in the future. So do you have capital projects that you're aware of?
I'm not specifically saying that the money shouldn't be voted for this year. What we're saying is that plans that will entail and commit the county to seek funding shouldn't be approved until we have
Have any such projects in mind?
The traffic light or roundabout or whatever on Highway
That's
1.
a future project. There are no commitments for any funds to do that.
No, I know there aren't. That's what we're saying. We would like to keep it that way.
There's no plans to ask for those funds in the near future.
However, if a plan is approved, that implies that the funds will be sought.
No, it doesn't.
Well, let's
Okay.
limit this to clarifying questions.
The rest are debates.
Yeah, sounds good. I think I don't have any questions. Barbara, did you have anything? Okay. Now let's open it up to members of the community. It looks like Greg has his hand raised and would like to speak. We're going to be doing 3 minutes per person. Len's going to keep time. So Greg, please go ahead.
I'm in full support of this letter. I would amplify one thing Claire said and add a couple of others. I think we can all see the change in traffic. I don't think there's any need for a light now where the one was proposed. Let's wait and see. It could be we don't need anything. As a point of information, I was trying to find it here online, but as I recall, 10 million of the 150 million in the Connect the Coast side was funded by charges on new development units. So that, 60 million in immediate roadway improvements, 85 million in trails and stuff, and 5 million in something else is my recollection. So it's far from funded. I would also say that the priorities of the county might shift dramatically. We already saw the county try and prop up healthcare system, and we also have the possibility of a local sewer agency being in dire shape very soon. I would rather see either healthcare or sewer get the money than doing anything to the roads here first. And then finally, if I were a county employee, given that the administration seems willing to allow hospitals and states and local governments to go bankrupt, I would worry about the fact that the county has a $3.7 billion unfunded pension liability. And I would worry about spending a dime of county money on anything other than making sure my pension was going to be funded. So that's just another question about priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I see that Dolores also has her hand raised. Dolores, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, it's true that these projects that we're talking about in Connect the Coast Side or the Mid-Penn proposal are not going to require funds in the next year, maybe not even in the next 2 years. But the fact is that we are putting forth changes to the LCP and getting a comprehensive traffic management plan approved that will include these things as the likely solutions to traffic issues that really we don't understand now in this environment. So I take issue with Dave's points in that he is kind of turning it back around on what really the MCC is intending, which is that community involvement in these projects needs to happen when it's a time where people can actually be involved. We just published a letter, peer review of the Mid-Penn's traffic report that says it's got a lot of flaws. And all these things have to be heard. People need to know these things and they don't know it now. So I totally support that letter. I think that I speak for resist density. And I think that people have to start thinking about the fact the world has changed and it's not going to be resolved between now and January. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's open this up for discussion on the council. We'll go around again, starting with Len.
So I have a letter that's next up on the agenda that relates to this item, but doesn't conflict necessarily. As I listen to the answer in terms of putting a halt on capital spending, it's specific. It doesn't stand in the way of planning efforts, which is what Connect the Coast Side is. So I would be for it.
Okay, thank you. Next is Dan. Any additional comments?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Well, as I started to say under the clarifying questions, I see no plans for any capital projects on the coast. There is no even hint of capital projects on the coast this year. No hint of seeking any funding. Connect the Coast Side is a list of potential future projects. Potential is the key word there. And even if, which is not going to happen, even if Connect the Coast Side was completely signed off all the way through the Board of Supervisors and the Coastal Commission by the end of this year, incredibly unlikely. It's not like the next day somebody's going to say, hey, we should put some money together to go do some of these projects. That's way, way out in the future. So if you want to ask for a delay in finishing the Connect the Coast Side or some other specific planning project, then that's what the letter should say. It shouldn't talk about capital projects. As it is, I'm going to vote against the letter.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Claire. Did you want to respond to that or add any additional comments?
Well, I just want to clarify. I don't know. I think it's fairly clear in the letter. I think Dolores's comments were pretty much on point with what the letter was trying to say. We realize that raising and committing money is not something that happens overnight, and it may very well be that no money will be sought at all during this current year. But the decisions will be made possibly this year, which would put the county in a direction, some of which may not be reversible, toward situations in which they are more or less obligated to look for money to finish what they may decide to do this year. In other words, let's talk for just a second, as an example, about the improvements that Joe was describing at the last meeting. They're probably not going to look for the money for that right now, but they may make decisions in the context of other planning that say, yes, we do commit ourselves to putting a sidewalk on Stetson, let's say. When they make that commitment, it means that the county is more or less on the line for finding the money to do that. They're not going to find the money right now, but the decisions that they make right now are going to affect the financial position of the county and may not be feasible. Perhaps even Cypress Point might not have the finances that it needs. We don't know that. That's beside the point. I probably shouldn't have even mentioned that. But any decisions that are made right now about things that the county commits itself to doing will involve money. So we don't think they should be made at this point.
Okay, so I want to point out again, nothing in Connect the Coast Side commits the county or anybody else to anything. It is a plan for possible future mitigations and treatments. It is not a list of projects. It is not a list of commitments. It's not even a master plan.
Okay, let's make sure we're staying in order here. Barbara?
Thank you. I support the letter. I really appreciate you and Claire doing 99.9% of the work on it, but I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll speak last, just going around. Yeah, as having co-written this letter, I do support it. You know, I agree that it's not likely that decisions will be made, but we want to make that certain. You know, we want to make sure that we hold off on, or that the county holds off on any decisions about funds. So I fully support this letter and we'll vote for it.
I think we
Um,
missed a step, so I would like to
Oh,
put forward a
we did.
motion to approve the letter.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Barbara. And we've all had a chance to speak. Is there anyone else on the council that has any additional, that wants to speak again? No? Okay. Let's go ahead and vote on the letter. Claire, can you do the roll call?
Len,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Dave,
No.
Michelle.
Yes.
I vote yes. It's 5-1 pass.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 4C, which is a letter written by Len Erickson on Connect the Coastside and Cypress Point and the process around that. Len, I'll hand it over to you to summarize the letter.
Okay. So I put up a slide that summarizes key points of the letter, and I'll just try to go through it quickly. Just tracing really three different things: the Connect the Coastside, Cypress Point, and the mobility survey. All of these took a significant step in January. With the Connect the Coastside, it was the public draft released for expected future comment in the spring. For Cypress Point, it was a major planning commission hearing held in January on the coast, and the mobility survey was initiated in a process we've already discussed. That was followed in March by COVID-19 impacting the public process in ways that we're all familiar with. And then we have the current status of these three areas. For Connect the Coastside, they're basically planning to hold 3 virtual meetings between May 30th and June 25th. I consider that these are an important step to take. Connect the Coastside has been a project that was initiated over 6 years ago and gone through at least 2 major public review and comment rounds that resulted in it being shelved. And I believe that these 3 virtual meetings, in any way you look at it, just a first step to bring it forward. They're a good way to gather comment. As I say specifically in the letter, what I'd be looking for is for the MCC to request at the June 8th or this July 8th meeting of the MCC to have a joint meeting with the county, both to assess what was learned and what was useful by way of growth or development of understanding of Connect the Coastside, but also to assess the question of where do we stand relative to going for approval. I think with this type of meeting and process, there's any reason to be concerned that these 3 meetings are not the end, but more the beginning of this process. And so that's the framework in which I'm supporting it to go ahead. In the case of Cypress Point, they are maintaining that they're still working really hard and active to see if they can get a planning commission meeting into June. That would either be on June 10th or June 24th. In either event, they haven't really put a serious revised roadway plan in place since they've had to drop the idea of Carlos carrying the traffic down to 16th Street. And without that, to me, 2 things come forward. One, even to get it forward, if they do, and they've asked to possibly hold space in our next May 27th meeting, that's very late and still really not time to even digest it. And second, I don't think that those meetings should be held in the same time and virtually in parallel with Connect the Coastside. They're really more operationally oriented, and they ought to at least give Connect the Coastside, which is a high-level planning meeting, at least a chance to finish those things. The mobility survey we've already discussed as it moves forward. So that's what I'm bringing forward. Basically, I have a 2-page letter on this. I mean, on review, and I've summarized it and tightened it up, if you will. And I'd be more than happy to table this to see what other actions occur between now and May 27th. I think the concern we have, is already well known, and I don't know what steps they're going to take in between. So while I'm happy with the draft I put here, my request would be, rather than a motion to vote on it at this meeting, to consider information sent to the council and to table the matter, and expect to work on an update for the May 27th meeting.
You want a motion for that?
Yeah, I think I would motion to table it.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second from somebody?
I'll second.
Hello.
Okay. So,
Sorry, my internet is slow. Did you put a motion forth to table the letter, Len?
yes, it was put forward by Barbara, and I think seconded. But so I've made my comments on it. You could go through the rest of the council.
Okay, let's go around and see if anyone has any additional comments. So we will start, we'll go the opposite direction this time, starting with me. I don't have any comments.
Can you actually put the letter up?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, Barbara?
Barbara, you muted.
I don't have any comments. I agree we should table it.
Okay, Claire?
Len, could you, I'm not seeing the end of the letter here. Could you summarize really quickly what we're asking for in this letter?
What it asks for with regard to Connect the Coast Side is that we indicate we're supportive to go ahead with the virtual meetings, and we would request that there be a meeting between the county and MCC afterwards to discuss what was learned and what's appropriate in assessing where these virtual meetings get us. I think the original roadmap after these meetings were presented would have been a study session and then the MCC to hold a meeting to vote on the matter.
Okay. I personally think there's some value in this letter, but it probably does make sense to table it because it could probably be fleshed out a little bit over the next couple of weeks as things develop. It also solves the issue of sending both letters that are so similar at the same time. It would give us a chance to restate whatever it is that we want to state in a second letter in a week or a few weeks from now. So I'm okay with tabling it, but I don't want it to go away.
It won't.
Great. Dave? I think you're on mute.
I reviewed the letter, so I'm pretty much okay with it. I'm fine with tabling it. That's why I seconded it. But this is our chance to discuss it. So if anybody thinks there's specific content in the letter that shouldn't be there or something that should be added, this would be the appropriate time to discuss it so that it will be there in the letter for the next meeting.
Thank you. Dan?
Yes, real quick, Len, the letter has a lot of the summary of the process. And I guess really the only real hit is in this letter is that we're approving the virtual meetings. So my question to you is, what in short words, what's the purpose of the letter in your mind?
The two specific purposes are, one is to ask them to hold explicitly a meeting after the virtual meetings are conducted, which I expect all the members of the council to attend and support in a process way positively, but to then ask the question of assessing how far they have moved things forward in terms of public understanding. That is, the next step is, do we really feel after looking at it that it could at the extreme be a really good job, but it still needs further discussion, possibly in a framework that isn't a virtual meeting. But I'd like to withhold that decision till after they've conducted the meetings and we can talk to ourselves and among the community and the county to see what we feel, rather than try to prejudge it at this point. The second one is just explicitly asking them not to have a planning commission meeting on Cypress Point while the virtual meetings are going on, which means pushing it into July or beyond.
Okay. You know, what I'd like to bring up that could be added to the letter is that I have in the past brought up the concern with the community understanding the different options of what could possibly be done to the highway. And I believe Joe Leclerc is on the line now still. I'd like him to make sure that he's hearing this, is that I really want in this letter a request that the county uses the PTV Vism traffic simulation software, which would enable the community to clearly see the impacts of any suggested implementations of control. That can easily be found at ptvgroup.com. Now, Vism software is commonly used to give traffic essentially, in my opinion, is the best way to communicate what will truly happen to the traffic, to the community. So it's used a lot. In fact, I first learned of this when Caltrans gave a presentation. Does everybody remember when they redid the bridge in Pacifica by Lindemar? They used Vism software to explain to the public how the traffic would flow around the detour during construction of that new bridge. So I highly urge the county to use this in helping the community understand impacts of traffic. And I'd like to see that in the letter.
Okay, guys.
Okay, let's go to Len. Len, thanks, Dan.
I think your comment belongs in input to the process. So I would suggest, Dan, if you could write I don't think Joe is still on, but if you could just write an email to him, send an email to raise exactly the suggestion you made, because I think that's really wasn't the intent of this. It's a detailed point, though, that I think is worth considering. So that's what I would suggest you do.
Okay, I'll do that.
And copy the council. That's the only other comment I had. I just, one point to draw out to people to relate between what was said at the April 22nd meeting by Joe and where we're going. At one point, he opened the meeting talking about an interim solution and a roundabout or consideration of an intersection and a signal. And I mean, afterwards, I took him to task on that point, because that's exactly what we weren't expecting to happen. I re-listened to the meeting again. And after those opening comments, he was more particular and in line with what I would expect Connect the COSI to do. But from a process standpoint, the meetings we'll go to for Connect the COSI are a pretty high level plan, but with particular reference to California, what the county has to do if it wants to do anything at that intersection is what Joe described as an ICE process, an internal process of review that Caltrans does. And it represents the concern because, one, you want that process which compares signals versus roundabouts, et cetera, to be as complete as possible with respect to what's the best solution. But that's not funding at all. That's just a document that helps the process go ahead. And the concern that the community should rightfully have, let's say with respect to Cypress Point, is that in moving forward with Cypress Point is the first time major review will be done for a coastal development permit, which is really what enables the funding of the project. So at that point, what you don't want to see happen is, as the first project out of the door, it sort of asks to tilt the ICE process to get the things it needs done, but not other things. And so I'm looking to make sure that in the Connect the Coast side, we get a full treatment of what the best solution is for that area at the level they're describing it. But all of those would be, actions occurring later, but those are the steps we have to watch.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I don't see any questions from the community on this. If someone does have a question.
Greg had comments.
Yeah, I put it in an email. I'm sorry.
Got it.
So I'm also in support of this letter. And if anything, I found that it doesn't go far enough to address the major deficiencies which are cropping up, identified by Resist Density, which just had 2 peer reviews done, one on the traffic and the other on the environmental review of Cypress Point. And then there's the fact that the county apparently didn't do a peer review of this major $150 million thing on its own. The transportation peer review was soundly negative. And in addition, I uncovered a few months ago, and I doubt I told anybody about this, I interviewed a couple of longtime transportation engineers about what was going on here. And I was shocked when they commented extremely negatively about DKS's capabilities. And maybe I can write this up, but they characterized them as a captive consultancy that wrote reports at the express direction of their clients rather than providing objective analyses. One guy said, there are consultancies that borrow your watch and tell you the time, and then there are consulting firms that take your watch and ask you, what time do you want it to be? DKS is the latter. So I've got severe questions about DKS and their findings, and the transportation peer review touched on those. The environmental peer review found lead issues, but don't forget there was an attorney letter that Resist Density found in the mid 80s. There was reports of asbestos untreated on that site, and those issues were also unresolved. And then finally, to Claire's point, changes in the traffic patterns are likely going to obviate the need for a bunch of signals and roundabouts around here, unless the development's done. But if that is done, that would then shift the need and the cost burden from existing residents to the new development. The numbers I quoted earlier were a little wrong. It's $15,667,000 was proposed to be funded by the new joiners out of the $150 million. So that was roughly 10% of the funding. But I would argue that if we can see traffic that doesn't require these changes, then 100% of it needs to be borne by Big Wave, Cypress Point, whatever else new stuff is created, rather than having the existing residents burdened with taxes and whatever. So in conclusion, I think both Connect the Coast Side and Cypress Point analyses both have major flaws and have to be revisited.
Thank you, Greg. I see that Dolores Silva also has her hand raised. Dolores, go ahead and speak and unmute yourself first.
Yes, one thing I would like to ask the MCC to do themselves, this whole proposal for this interim light and you know what and making Carlos one way for that block that runs in front of the post office is a big problem for existing residents, because it will, like, if I go to the post office in my car, I'll have to go, I can go south, but then to come north, I'm going to have to get on the highway. I mean, people should try and drive that, because yes, I could go up California Street. Have you driven on California Street? There are tree roots that are making that street even more steep than what it already is. And you know, then there's the people coming from the other side of the highway that are going to have to turn on Bellamar if they do whatever they're proposing to do to Winky Way. I mean, that whole thing is a mess. Try driving those roads. Check it out for yourselves. It's California Street is too steep for what they're proposing, and it's just a mess. Talk about VMT being affected and things like that. I don't know where they came up with this idea, but it's not good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. So since there is a motion to table the letter, Len, did you want to go around and gather any more feedback from the council?
No, I
Or
did take notes from the discussion to date. I'm fine.
okay, so I'd propose going ahead and closing out this agenda item. Do we need to take a vote on the motion? Okay, yes. So let's take a vote. Claire, can you call roll? The motion is to table the letter.
Mute myself. Okay, Len,
Yes.
Dan, Dan,
Dan, you're
Unmute, Dan.
you're on
Yes.
mute. Thank you.
Barbara,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
I vote yes. It's 6-0.
Okay, thank you.
Also, a clarification for the minutes, the motion is to table until the May 27th meeting, not just to table.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, moving on to item 4D. We're going to talk about May through July meeting plans, and Len is going to lead this off.
So I think most of the major items that I was concerned might exist have come up to this point, that we've been clear on what the current proposals there are for June, including both Connect the Coast Side and the Cypress Point, as well as expecting we'll hear more from the county on the 27th about that. And I think each letter has, had its own separate resolution. So really, I think at this point, the reason I put it on was to have discussion if needed, but I don't think any further discussion is needed from my perspective.
Okay, thanks.
So
Let's move on then. So we'll close out the regular agenda and go to council activity. Let's just go around, and if anyone has any activity, correspondence, or meetings attended, go ahead and speak to that. Let's start with Len. Do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Dan? Any council activity?
I'll pass.
Okay. Dave?
No, nothing to report.
Claire?
We've been attending the COVID-19 county updates. Also attended the Half Moon Bay study session on the local effects of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Carrie gave most of the updates that have come out of the county updates. So I didn't have anything to add to that. And then Barbara, did you have anything?
Yes, I did attend the SEAP meeting on May 1st. And it was just mostly talking about what the different agencies have been doing, handling the virus. That was basically all we talked about. And the last CERT class was cut off right. They had one more day, and now it's hoping that this summer they'll be able to finish that class, of which I'm one of the people.
Oh, good. Nice.
That's
yeah, I was
it.
wondering what happened to that. I know that the last day got cut off, so hopefully
Yeah,
you guys will be able to get done soon.
I hope so.
Okay, great. Yeah, and just the permit log update was in here. That is up to date as of yesterday. So anyone can find that on the MCC website. Just a list of all the current planning referrals that we've received. And then last on the agenda is the topic of future agendas. So we have a couple things up for the May 27th agenda, as we talked about earlier. The mobility survey, results of that will be presented. We have here listed common knowledge. I think that's more of a broader kind of closeout on that subject. So as we saw during the mobility survey, two main things that came out of that were the survey and the communication. So I will be meeting with Ellie and some members of the Board of Supervisors staff this coming week to talk about any communication initiatives, such as a newsletter that we discussed in the survey, the newsletter that we proposed. So I hope to have an update on that at the May 27th meeting. I think the child care ordinance is no longer going to be on that meeting. And then for June 10th, we had tentatively have scheduled a discussion about parks and then Pillar Point Harbor. Does anyone have any other agenda items that they want to add to upcoming meetings?
I guess with respect to the meetings that will be going on in June, I don't see trying to get into communications with parks in June, but we'll take a look at the Pillar Point Harbor. There's various things happening there, and that might be a useful topic that's not on the subject of mobility, but nothing else. Oh, and we took the child care ordinance off.
Yeah.
It's also possible that for 3 major virtual meetings and the possibility of a Cypress meeting, that by the time we get to June 24th, we may be meeting out at that point, but we can assess that on the first meeting in June.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a question? When is our council member going to get sworn in?
I just before this meeting, I received a call from the county council. It was brought to our attention that although the regulations of the county governing what we do would support what we did for replacement, but our own bylaws, which are still bylaws that are in effect, state that in the last year, if a vacancy comes open, just a single vacancy, it has to remain open. So I reviewed that with county council that literally just before this meeting. And although we're very impressed with the applicants and especially the one we chose, and I have not had a chance to actually speak with her because of the timing here, that basically we'll have to consider that selection process moot. And I take the responsibility for it. I should have read into our own bylaws a little bit more fully and looked at it, but I did not. So both apologies to the council for the time we took to do it, and to the applicants, and especially to Audra. I thought I was pleased with her and hope she'll continue to consider the council with an upcoming election, but that's the status of that.
Does she know that?
I've just told her now. I wanted to.
She's on the meeting.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
She's on. I really sure. Yeah. I wanted to talk to her immediately afterwards, but I will get in touch with her immediately afterwards, but that's the status.
Oh, no, she's still here. Good.
Yep.
Lynn, is it possible, can you cite the, the section of the bylaws that's
I can't do it off the top of my head, but I read it directly and county council did too. So I'll send it out. Sure.
Possible to email it to the council?
Yeah, I'll let them know as part of that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Well,
Did you? Sorry, Claire.
what did
you want to say?
I'm sorry that we won't be able to have her on the council.
I know.
Yeah.
Ditto that.
Yep. Hopefully she will run in November.
Yes. Okay. Well, on that side note, I think that is the end of our regular agenda. Unless anyone has anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Two. So Len,
Okay.
and the second?
I'll second.
There we go.
Barbara. Great. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully it went pretty smoothly for my first time.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
appreciate
good.
everyone's help.
Good job.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.